My son-in-law slept with my wife a week before we signed the divorce papers. I pretended to know nothing. At the meeting, the lawyer handed me a document denying my rights. I smiled and slid a recording on the table. Minutes later, they both fainted. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought that at 63 years old, I would discover that the two people I trusted most in this world were plotting my destruction. But life has a cruel way of teaching us lessons when we least expect them. It was a Tuesday morning in early November, and I was supposed to be at my monthly checkup with Dr. Morrison. 29 years of marriage to Christina had taught me to follow routines, to be predictable. She liked knowing where I was at all times. I thought it was because she cared. I was wrong about many things. The appointment was canceled at the last minute. Something about a family emergency with the doctor's mother. I decided not to call Christina to let her know I was coming home early. Why would I? It was my house too, wasn't it? I pulled into our driveway on Maple Street at exactly 10:45 in the morning. The house looked the same as always. White shutters, red brick, the oak tree that Stephanie and I planted when she was 8 years old. Everything normal, everything peaceful. I should have known that peace was about to shatter. I used my key quietly, not wanting to startle Christina if she was still sleeping. She had been staying up late lately, claiming she was stressed about our upcoming divorce proceedings. The irony of that excuse would become clear soon enough. The living room was empty, but I could hear voices coming from upstairs. Christina's voice and another voice I knew all too well. James, my son-in-law-to-be, the man who was supposed to marry my daughter Stephanie in 6 months. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, my hand gripping the wooden railing. I should have announced myself. I should have called out. Instead, something made me listen. Are you sure William won't come back early? That was James' voice, hushed, but clear. He's predictable as clockwork. Doctor's appointment, then lunch at that diner on 5th Street. We have at least 3 hours. Christina's voice carried a lightness I hadn't heard in years. 3 hours. 3 hours for what? I climbed the stairs slowly, each step careful and silent. 30 years of living in this house had taught me which boards creaked. The voices grew clearer as I reached the landing. What about Stephanie? She still thinks we're getting married in June. James sounded almost amused. Poor thing has no idea. She's so trusting, just like her father used to be. Christina laughed, a sound that cut through me like broken glass. Once the divorce is final, we'll have everything we need. The house, the investments, everything William worked for his entire life. I pressed myself against the wall outside our bedroom door, my heart hammering so hard I was afraid they would hear it. And the inheritance Stephanie is supposed to get? James asked. What inheritance? By the time we're done, there won't be anything left for her to inherit. William will be lucky to keep his car. Christina's voice was cold, calculating. You're playing your part perfectly, honey. She adores you. It's not hard. She's desperate to please everyone, makes her easy to manipulate. James paused. Are you sure your lawyer can make those documents stick? The ones that give William almost nothing? Robert owes me favors. He'll make sure William signs everything without reading the fine print. Men his age get overwhelmed by legal language. They just want it to be over. I stood there in my own hallway, listening to my wife of 29 years and my daughter's fiancé plan my destruction with the casual tone of people discussing the weather. The woman I had shared a bed with, raised a child with, built a life with, was conspiring to steal everything from me and my daughter. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about Stephanie. My beautiful, trusting daughter who believed she had found love with a man who was using her as a pawn in his game with my wife. When should we tell her about us? James asked. After the wedding. We'll wait a few months, then I'll file for divorce from William. You'll find some excuse to leave Stephanie, and then we can be together openly. By then we'll have control of everything. I heard movement from inside the room, the sound of footsteps on carpet. I moved quickly but silently down the hallway, slipping into the guest bathroom and closing the door just as our bedroom door opened. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, my hands shaking, not from fear but from rage. And something else. something colder. Determination. I heard James leave 20 minutes later, his car engine starting and fading down the street. I waited another 10 minutes before flushing the toilet and running the water, creating the sounds of normal bathroom use. When I came downstairs, Christina was in the kitchen, humming while she loaded the dishwasher. She looked up when she saw me, her face immediately shifting into the mask of the suffering wife she had been wearing for months. "You're back early," she said, but there was a slight edge to her voice. "Doctor had to cancel. Family emergency." I kept my voice level, normal. "What have you been up to?" "Just cleaning, organizing. You know how I get when I'm stressed." She closed the dishwasher and turned to face me. "Have you thought any more about the settlement papers? Robert really thinks we should sign them next Friday." I looked at her face, this woman I had loved for nearly 3 decades, and saw a stranger. How long had she been wearing this mask? How long had I been blind to who she really was? "I've been thinking about a lot of things," I said. She studied my expression for a moment, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Suspicion? Worry? But then she smiled, the same smile that had once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. "Well, don't think too hard. You know stress isn't good for your blood pressure." I nodded and walked past her to my study. I closed the door and sat down at my desk, staring at the wall where pictures of our family hung. Christina and me on our wedding day, Stephanie's graduation from college, holidays, anniversaries, all the moments that had seemed to matter. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder I had bought months ago for work meetings. I had never used it. I turned it over in my hands, thinking about the conversation I had just overheard. They wanted to play games. They wanted to destroy me and my daughter while pretending to love us. Fine. I could play games too. I had 1 week before we were scheduled to sign the divorce papers. 1 week to gather evidence, 1 week to protect my daughter from a man who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone to her inheritance. I slipped the recorder into my pocket and made my first decision. I would not confront them. I would not give them the chance to change their strategy or cover their tracks. I would let them think they were winning. And when the time was right, when they felt most confident in their victory, I would show them exactly what happened to people who tried to destroy my family. I had been a fool for months, maybe years. But I wasn't a fool anymore. The game had begun, and they had no idea I was playing. The next 7 days became the longest week of my life. Not because time moved slowly, but because every moment required me to perform the role of a defeated husband while my mind burned with the knowledge of what was really happening in my own home. I became a ghost in my own life, invisible and watching. Wednesday morning, I watched Christina put on her makeup in our bathroom mirror. She hummed while she applied her lipstick, the same coral shade she had worn for years. I wondered how many times she had put on this same lipstick before meeting James. How many lies had those coral lips told me? "I'm having lunch with Margaret today," she said, not looking at me. "Wedding planning stuff for Stephanie." Margaret. Christina's sister who lived 3 states away and rarely visited. I nodded and made the appropriate sound of acknowledgement, but I was already reaching for my phone to text Stephanie. The text I sent was simple. "How's the wedding planning going with Aunt Margaret?" Her response came back within minutes. "What lunch with Aunt Margaret? I thought she was traveling in Europe this month." I deleted both messages and went to brush my teeth. Another lie confirmed, another piece of evidence collected. That afternoon, while Christina was out at her imaginary lunch, I went through her things. I felt dirty doing it, like I was violating something sacred. But I reminded myself that she had been violating our marriage for months. I found the receipts first, hidden in a jewelry box I had given her for our 10th anniversary. Hotel receipts dating back 8 months. Always the same hotel, the Riverside Inn on the other side of town. Always mid-afternoon check-in times, always paid in cash, always on days when Christina claimed to be running errands or visiting friends. I photographed each receipt with my phone, my hands steady, despite the rage building in my chest. In her dresser drawer, underneath a stack of scarves, I found printed emails. She had been careless, printing out messages from an account I didn't know existed. The email address was cmj2000 4@gmail.com. Christina, Margaret, James. Even their secret email address mocked me. I read through the messages, each one a dagger to whatever was left of my heart. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. W is at his book club until 9. We'll have plenty of time. From James. The lawyer says the papers are almost ready. W won't know what hit him. We'll have everything we ever wanted. From Christina. What about S? She's been asking about setting a wedding date. From James. Let her plan. The bigger the wedding, the more it will hurt when you leave her, but think of it as an investment in our future. From Christina, I photographed each email, my anger transforming into something colder and more focused. They weren't just stealing from me, they were deliberately planning to devastate my daughter. Stephanie, who had spent weeks agonizing over flower arrangements and seating charts, was planning a wedding to a man who was counting the days until he could break her heart. Thursday evening, I installed a voice recording app on my phone. I told myself it was for protection, for evidence. But really, I needed to hear them again. I needed to understand the depth of their betrayal. I didn't have to wait long. Friday afternoon, I announced I was going to the hardware store to fix the leak under the kitchen sink. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away and walked back, entering through the side gate that led to our backyard. I positioned myself under the open bedroom window, my phone recording, and waited. They arrived within minutes of each other. James first, then Christina. I heard the front door close, heard their footsteps on the stairs, heard the bedroom door shut. Did you bring the revised papers? Christina's voice was clear through the open window. Right here. Robert outdid himself. By the time William realizes what he signed, it'll be too late to contest any of it. James sounded pleased with himself. He'll get the house for 6 months, then it reverts to you due to the maintenance clause. What maintenance clause? The one that states if property taxes or major repairs exceed $5,000 in any 6-month period, ownership reverts to the financially responsible party. Robert's going to make sure the assessment comes back high enough to trigger it immediately. My grip tightened on the phone. They weren't just stealing from me in the divorce. They were setting up a system to steal my home afterward. And the business accounts? Christina asked. All joint accounts will be frozen pending litigation that Robert will drag out for months. By then, we'll have moved everything offshore. What about his retirement? Tied up in legal fees. Robert estimates it'll cost him at least $50,000 just to fight for what's rightfully his, and he doesn't have $50,000 in liquid assets. I listened to them plan the destruction of my life's work with the efficiency of architects designing a building. Every detail calculated, every escape route planned. There's something else, James said, and his tone became more serious. Stephanie's been asking questions. What kind of questions? About us, about why I spend so much time here when you're alone. She's not stupid, Christina. She notices things. She notices what she wants to notice. She's so desperate for this marriage to work that she'll ignore red flags the size of billboards. Maybe we should be more careful. We have 1 more week. After the papers are signed, it won't matter what she suspects. She'll be too busy dealing with her father's financial ruin to focus on us. I had heard enough. I slipped away from the window and walked back to my car, my mind processing everything I had just learned. That evening, I sat in my study pretending to read the newspaper while Christina cooked dinner. She was making my favorite meal, pot roast with carrots and potatoes. I wondered if this was her way of easing her conscience or if it was just part of the performance. "Dinner's ready," she called out, her voice warm and domestic. I joined her at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals over the years. She served me with a smile, asked about my day, listened to my invented stories about the hardware store and the leak that didn't need fixing. "You've been quiet lately," she said, cutting into her meat. "Are you having second thoughts about the divorce?" I looked across the table at this woman who was methodically destroying me while serving me pot roast, and I felt something shift inside me. Not sadness anymore. Not even anger. Something calmer and infinitely more dangerous. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," I said. "About the future. About what comes next." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her fingers were soft and warm, the same fingers that had signed hotel receipts and typed emails planning my ruin. "I know this is hard, William, but it's for the best. We both deserve to be happy." Happy. She was going to be happy with my money, in my house with my daughter's fiancé, while I lived in some small apartment trying to rebuild my life at 63. "You're right," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "We do both deserve to be happy." Her smile was radiant, genuine. She thought she had won. After dinner, I helped her clean the dishes, kissed her goodnight, and went to my study. I uploaded the day's recordings to a secure cloud account I had created. I organized the photographs of receipts and emails into folders. I created a timeline of their affair, cross-referencing it with my bank statements to see exactly how much of my money had funded their relationship. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 8 months, Christina had withdrawn nearly $15,000 in cash from our joint accounts, always in small amounts, always with explanations I had believed. Grocery shopping, gas, small household expenses. I had been funding my own betrayal. I pulled out the divorce papers Robert had sent over, the ones Christina was so eager for me to sign. I read through them carefully now, seeing them with new eyes. Every clause was designed to benefit her while appearing fair on the surface. The language was complex, deliberately confusing. But I wasn't confused anymore. I understood exactly what they were trying to do. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. David Martinez had been my lawyer for years, handling business contracts and property deals. He was expensive, thorough, and most importantly, he owed me no favors. I typed out a text message. "David, I need to see you tomorrow morning. Urgent matter regarding divorce proceedings. Can you meet at 8 a.m.? His response came back quickly. "Of course, my office. Everything okay?" I typed back, "It will be." Then I locked my phone, turned off the lights, and went upstairs. Christina was already asleep, or pretending to be. I lay down beside her in the darkness, listening to her breathing, thinking about the past 29 years. I had loved this woman. I had built a life with her, dreamed of growing old with her. I had trusted her with everything I had, everything I was. She was about to learn that trust, once broken, becomes something much more dangerous. A weapon. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp November air that makes everything feel sharper, more real. I woke up at 5:30, as I had every morning that week, but this time was different. Today was the day everything would change. Christina was still sleeping when I got dressed. I chose my clothes carefully. My best navy suit, the one I wore to important business meetings, the white shirt Stephanie had given me for my birthday, and the tie Christina had picked out for our anniversary 5 years ago. If this was going to be the last time I played the role of her husband, I was going to look the part. I made coffee in the kitchen, standing at the window that looked out over our backyard. The oak tree Stephanie and I had planted was losing its leaves, brown and gold scattered across the grass like memories falling away. In 6 hours I would be sitting across from Christina and James in Robert's office, listening to them execute their plan. They had no idea I would be executing mine. At 7:45, Christina came downstairs wearing the black dress she saved for important occasions. She had put on makeup and styled her hair as if this were a celebration instead of what she thought would be my destruction. "Ready for today?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, and it was the first completely honest thing I had said to her in a week. She squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that might have been comforting if I didn't know she had practiced it. "It'll be over soon, and we can both move on with our lives." Move on. Yes, we certainly would be doing that. We drove to Robert's office in separate cars. Christina claimed she had errands to run afterward, but I knew she was meeting James to celebrate. I had heard them planning it during one of my recorded conversations, lunch at the Riverside Inn, the same hotel where they had been meeting for months. How fitting. Robert Hendricks had been our family lawyer for 15 years. I had trusted him to handle property purchases, business contracts, even Stephanie's college fund setup. The fact that he had been bought by my wife was perhaps the most personally painful betrayal of all. Professional ethics meant nothing when Christina was involved, apparently. His office was on the 3rd floor of a downtown building that tried too hard to look impressive. Marble lobby, brass elevators, oil paintings of people who probably never existed. I arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, as scheduled. Christina was already there, sitting in the leather chair across from Robert's mahogany desk. She looked composed, confident she had dressed for victory. "William," Robert stood up when I entered, extending his hand with the same firm grip he had always used. "Please have a seat." I sat down next to Christina, close enough to smell her perfume. The same scent she had worn on our first date 31 years ago. Some details never change, even when everything else becomes a lie. "Before we begin," I said, pulling a small digital recorder from my jacket pocket and placing it on the desk, "I think there are some things we need to discuss." Christina's eyes flicked to the device, then back to my face. Something shifted in her expression, not quite fear, but a recognition that something was wrong. "William, what's that for?" Robert asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Insurance," I replied. "I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what's happening here today." Robert shuffled the papers on his desk. "Well, as we discussed, these divorce papers represent a fair and equitable division of assets. Christina will retain the family home for 6 months to allow for a smooth transition, after which ownership will revert based on financial responsibility clauses." "Stop," I said quietly. Robert paused mid-sentence. Christina's hand tightened on her purse. I said, "Stop." I reached into my jacket and pulled out a second device, identical to the first. "You see, Robert, I've been doing my own research this week, learning about financial responsibility clauses that don't exist in standard divorce agreements, learning about assessment schedules that can be manipulated, learning about a lot of things." The room went very quiet. Christina's breathing had changed, becoming shallow and quick. "William, I'm not sure what you're implying," Robert began, but I held up my hand. "I'm not implying anything, I'm stating facts." I pressed play on the second recorder. James' voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "Robert outdid himself. By the time William realizes what he signed, it'll be too late to contest any of it. He'll get the house for 6 months, then it reverts to you due to the maintenance clause." Christina went very still. Robert's face lost all color. The recording continued. "The one that states if property taxes or major repairs exceed $5,000 in any 6-month period, ownership reverts to the financially responsible party. Robert's going to make sure the assessment comes back high enough to trigger it immediately." "Turn that off," Christina whispered. But I didn't turn it off. I let it play. I let them hear Christina's voice discussing how they would move money offshore, how they would tie up my retirement in legal fees, how they planned to destroy Stephanie's trust in love itself. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Robert cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "William, I can explain." "Can you?" I looked at him calmly. "Can you explain how a lawyer I've trusted for 15 years conspired to defraud me? Can you explain how you violated every ethical standard of your profession for a woman who's been stealing from me for months?" Christina finally spoke, her voice thin and sharp. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photographs of hotel receipts. 8 months of affair documentation, $15,000 of my money spent on hotel rooms, email accounts I never knew existed, plans to steal not just from me, but from my daughter. Christina's composure was cracking. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I stood up, looking down at both of them. "I understand that my wife of 29 years has been planning my destruction with my future son-in-law. I understand that they've been using my daughter as a pawn in their game. I understand that you, Robert, have been helping them commit fraud." Robert was frantically shuffling papers. "The divorce papers are legitimate." "The divorce papers are an elaborate theft scheme," I corrected, "designed to steal my house, my money, and my daughter's inheritance. But here's what you don't understand." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I've spent this week with David Martinez, going over every detail of your fraudulent contract. I've documented every violation of legal ethics, every intentionally misleading clause, every instance of conspiracy to commit theft. Christina was breathing hard now. William, please. Please what? Please let you destroy me? Please let you break my daughter's heart for money? Please pretend I never heard you and James laughing about how easy it would be to manipulate her? I opened the folder and spread the contents across Robert's desk. Bank statements showing Christina's cash withdrawals, photographs of hotel receipts, printed emails from the CMJ 2024 account, phone records showing calls between Christina and James going back 8 months. "This is everything," I said. "Every lie, every theft, every betrayal, all documented, all legally admissible." Robert was staring at the evidence spread across his desk. "William, if we could just..." "Just what? Negotiate? There's nothing to negotiate." I pulled out one final document from the folder. "These are the real divorce papers, prepared by a real lawyer who doesn't accept bribes from cheating wives. Christina gets nothing. The house remains mine. The joint accounts are frozen pending investigation of theft, and you, Robert, get to explain to the State Bar Association why you conspired to commit fraud against your own client." Christina shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "You can't do this. We can fight this." "With what money? Your legal defense will cost more than you could steal from me. And that assumes you can find a lawyer willing to represent someone facing criminal charges for conspiracy and theft." The color drained from her face. "Criminal charges?" I nodded toward the evidence on the desk. $15,000 in documented theft. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Email evidence of planning to steal my daughter's inheritance. Yes, Christina, criminal charges. Robert was frantically gathering papers, as if organizing his desk could somehow organize the disaster his life had just become. "William, surely we can reach some kind of agreement. The only agreement I'm interested in is your resignation from this case and your cooperation with the investigation into your conduct." I looked at both of them. "You wanted to play games with my life. Now you get to live with the consequences." Christina sank back into her chair, her perfect composure finally shattered. "What about James? What about Stephanie? What about them?" I gathered my evidence back into the folder. "James is going to have to explain to my daughter why their engagement is over, and then he's going to disappear from our lives forever, or he'll join you in facing criminal charges." "She'll never forgive you," Christina whispered. "For what? For protecting her from a man who was planning to break her heart for money? For saving her inheritance from thieves? For preventing her from marrying someone who thought she was nothing more than a useful fool?" I shook my head. "She'll thank me when she understands what you were really planning." I walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. "You have 24 hours to remove your belongings from my house. After that, anything left behind becomes evidence in your theft case." Robert started to stand. "William, please, if we could just..." But I was already walking out, leaving them to face the wreckage of their carefully planned destruction. In the elevator, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. They had planned my humiliation, my financial ruin, my daughter's heartbreak. They had counted on my weakness, my trust, my love. They had forgotten that sometimes love becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. The drive home from Robert's office took exactly 18 minutes, but it felt like hours. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, my breathing calm, but my mind was racing through everything that had just happened. Christina and Robert sitting in stunned silence as their carefully constructed fraud collapsed around them. The look of absolute shock when they realized I had been 3 steps ahead of them the entire time. But I wasn't done, not even close. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house that Christina had planned to steal from me. The house where I had raised my daughter, where I had built a life based on what I thought was love and trust. In a few hours, this would truly be my home again, not the stage for an elaborate deception. My phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Corner Beans in 1 hour. Come alone. James." Of course he wanted to talk. Christina had probably called him the moment I left Robert's office, probably hysterical, probably hoping he could somehow fix what couldn't be fixed. I typed back, "Corner beans, 1 hour." I had 47 minutes to prepare for what I suspected would be the most important conversation of this entire nightmare. James didn't know how much I actually knew about his role in this conspiracy. He was probably hoping to negotiate, to find some way out of the mess he had created. He was going to be disappointed. I went inside and straight to my study, where I had spent the past week organizing evidence and planning for every possible scenario. I pulled out a file I had labeled James Documentation and reviewed its contents one more time. The photographs of him entering my house on days when Christina claimed to be alone. The bank records showing that Christina's cash withdrawals always coincided with his visits. The printed emails where they discussed not just their affair, but their detailed plans for after the divorce. But the most damaging evidence was in the recordings from Wednesday evening when I had hidden in the garden shed and listened to them through the open kitchen window. They had been drinking wine, celebrating what they thought was their imminent victory, and their conversation had revealed the true scope of their conspiracy. I transferred the most incriminating recording to my phone and checked the battery level. 97%. More than enough. Corner Beans was a small coffee shop 3 blocks from my house, the kind of place where retirees read newspapers and college students pretended to study while scrolling through their phones. I had been going there for years, long enough that Maria, the owner, always had my usual order ready before I reached the counter. "The usual, Mr. William?" she asked as I walked in. "Not today, Maria, just black coffee. I'm meeting someone." She nodded and poured coffee into a large ceramic mug. "Everything okay? You look like you've had a long day." If she only knew. "Just some family business to sort out." I chose a table in the back corner where I could see the entire restaurant, but our conversation wouldn't be overheard. James arrived exactly on time, which surprised me. Punctuality had never been one of his strengths. He looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. Good. He should look terrible. "William," he said as he approached the table, "thank you for coming." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit down, James. Let's talk." He ordered coffee from Maria, his hands shaking slightly as he counted out exact change. When she was out of earshot, he leaned across the table. "Christina told me what happened at Robert's office," he began. "Look, I know how this looks." "Do you?" I interrupted. "Because I'm curious how you think this looks from my perspective." He swallowed hard. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But things aren't exactly what they seem." I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us, the screen facing up. "Really? Things aren't what they seem? Tell me, James, what exactly do you think I know?" "You know about Christina and me, about our relationship." He was choosing his words carefully, like he was walking through a minefield. "But there are things you don't understand about how it started, about why." I pressed play on my phone. James's own voice filled the space between us. "What about the inheritance Stephanie is supposed to get when William dies?" Then Christina's voice, "What inheritance? The life insurance alone is worth $250,000, plus his retirement accounts, plus the house equity. But here's the beautiful part. If he dies within 2 years of the divorce, I still get everything as his emergency beneficiary. He never updated those forms after we separated." James went completely white. The recording continued. "So we wait 2 years, then what? An accident? Nothing that obvious. Old men have heart attacks all the time, especially men under financial stress who've lost everything in a divorce. And William's blood pressure medication. Well, let's just say the dosage could easily be adjusted if someone had access to his pills." I stopped the recording and looked directly into James's eyes. "Still think I don't understand how things look?" He was shaking now, his coffee cup rattling against the saucer. "William, we never actually planned to..." "To what?" "Murder me." I kept my voice low and calm. Because that's exactly what you were planning. Christina was going to increase my blood pressure medication until my heart gave out, and you were both going to inherit everything, including the life insurance money. No, you don't understand. Christina was just fantasizing. She gets carried away sometimes. We would never actually. I played another section of the recording. The pharmacy where William gets his prescriptions doesn't require ID for pickups if you know his information. I've been getting his refills for years. It would be simple to switch out some of the pills for higher dosages. That's Christina talking, James said desperately. I never agreed to any of that. I played his response from the recording. How long would it take? For the medication to work, I mean. His face crumpled. There was no denying his own voice asking for details about how to kill me. You weren't just planning to steal my money and break my daughter's heart, I said. You were planning to murder me. And then what? Console poor Stephanie through her grief while you inherited her father's money? It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he whispered. Christina said you would never find out. She said we could have everything without anyone getting hurt. Without anyone getting hurt? I leaned forward. You were going to kill me, James. You were going to drug me to death and make it look like a heart attack. How exactly does that qualify as not hurting anyone? He buried his face in his hands. She convinced me that you were already old, that you didn't have much time anyway. She said it would be merciful, that you wouldn't suffer. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. They had discussed my murder with the same tone they might use to discuss putting down a sick pet. Merciful, quick, convenient for everyone. And Stephanie? I asked. What was the plan for her after you killed her father? We were going to wait a year, then I was going to leave her. Christina said she would be so devastated by losing you that she wouldn't fight me for anything. She'd just want the pain to stop. I stared at him across the table. This man my daughter loved. This man who had sat at my dinner table, who had called me Dad in moments when he thought no one else was listening. He had been planning to murder me and destroy my daughter simultaneously. How long? I asked. How long have you been planning this? Since last Christmas, he admitted. Christina approached me first. She said Stephanie had talked about how much money you had saved, about the life insurance, about the house value. She said it was a shame that money would be wasted on an old man who didn't even appreciate what he had. And you agreed to seduce my daughter for money? It started as just information gathering. Christina wanted to know about your finances, your habits, your health. But then we started spending time together, and one thing led to another. You fell in love with my wife while lying to my daughter. I know how it sounds, he said miserably. But Christina made it seem so logical. She said you were already planning to divorce her anyway, that this would just speed up the inevitable. I pulled out the folder of evidence I had brought and spread some of the photographs across the table. Pictures of him entering my house, receipts from their hotel meetings, printed emails discussing their plans. The inevitable, I repeated. Is that what you call conspiracy to commit murder? He stared at the evidence, his shoulders sagging with defeat. What do you want, William? Money? I'll disappear from Stephanie's life. I'll never contact any of you again. Just please don't go to the police. What I want, I said, standing up from the table, is for you to understand something very important. You tried to destroy my family. You tried to murder me. You tried to steal my daughter's inheritance and break her heart, and you thought you could get away with it because you believed I was weak. I gathered the photographs and put them back in the folder. But here's what you didn't count on. I'm not just Stephanie's father. I'm a man who has spent his entire life working, saving, planning for his daughter's future. And when someone threatens my daughter's future, I become very dangerous. I pulled out a business card and placed it on the table in front of him. That's Detective Maria Santos with the Fraud Division. She's expecting your call within 24 hours. You're going to tell her everything, every detail of your conspiracy with Christina, every conversation about murdering me, every plan to steal from my daughter. And if I don't, then she'll arrest you anyway, but the charges will be much more severe. Right now, you're looking at conspiracy to commit fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. If you cooperate, you might avoid the death penalty. James picked up the business card with trembling fingers. What about Christina? Christina made her choice when she decided to turn my marriage into a murder plot. She'll face the same charges you do. I walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. Oh, and James, when you call my daughter to end your engagement, you will not tell her the real reason. You will simply say that you've realized you're not ready for marriage. You will not blame her. You will not make her feel guilty, and you will disappear from her life completely. Because if you hurt her any more than you already have, I will make sure the rest of your life is very, very unpleasant. I left him sitting at that table, staring at Detective Santos's business card and contemplating the wreckage of the life he thought he was going to steal. Outside, I called Stephanie. "Hi, Dad," she answered on the second ring, her voice bright and happy. "How did the meeting go today?" "It went exactly as planned," I said. "Honey, I need you to come over to the house tonight. There are some things we need to discuss." "Is everything okay?" I looked back through the window of corner beans, where James was still sitting with his head in his hands. "Everything is going to be fine," I told my daughter. "Finally." Stephanie arrived at 7:30 that evening, exactly when I had asked her to come. I watched her pull into the driveway from my study window, noting how she took a moment to check her reflection in the rearview mirror before getting out of her car. She was nervous. She had sensed something in my voice during our phone call, that subtle tension that children learn to recognize in their parents no matter how old they become. I met her at the front door, and for a moment I just looked at her. My daughter, 32 years old, beautiful, intelligent, trusting. She was wearing the blue sweater I had given her for her birthday and the engagement ring that James had chosen with my wife's help. How many layers of deception were wrapped around that simple piece of jewelry. "Dad, you're scaring me," she said, stepping inside and giving me a hug. "You look like someone died." In a way, someone had. The family she thought she knew had died today in Robert's office. "Come sit down, sweetheart," I said, leading her to the living room. "We need to talk." She settled onto the couch, the same couch where she had told me about James 2 years ago, where she had excitedly shown me her engagement ring 6 months ago, where she had spent countless hours as a child watching cartoons and doing homework. So many memories in this room. Soon, there would be one more. "Dad, what's going on? You're really freaking me out." I had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in my head, but sitting across from her now, looking into her trusting brown eyes, I realized that no amount of preparation could make this easy. "Stephanie, what I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear, but I need you to listen to everything before you react, okay?" She nodded, but I could see the fear growing in her expression. "Your mother and I are getting divorced. That much you know. What you don't know is why. Dad, you don't have to explain your marriage to me. I understand that sometimes people just grow apart. Stephanie," my voice was gentle but firm, "your mother has been having an affair." She blinked, processing this information. "An affair? With who?" The question I had been dreading, the answer that would shatter her world. "With James." For a moment she didn't react at all. She just stared at me as if the words hadn't quite reached her brain yet. Then she laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "That's not funny, Dad. Why would you say something like that?" "Because it's true." "No." She shook her head vigorously. "No, that's impossible. James loves me. We're getting married in June. He wouldn't, and Mom would never." Her voice trailed off as she saw the expression on my face. I pulled out my phone and opened the first recording. "I'm going to play something for you, and I need you to listen carefully." Christina's voice filled the room. "Poor thing has no idea. She's so trusting, just like her father used to be. Once the divorce is final, we'll have everything we need." Then James. "And the inheritance Stephanie is supposed to get?" "What inheritance? By the time we're done, there won't be anything left for her to inherit." Stephanie's face went completely white. She pressed her hands against her ears. "Stop. Stop it. That's not real. That's not them." But I didn't stop. I played the conversation about using her for financial information. I played their discussion of waiting until after the wedding to reveal their relationship. I played James, calling her desperate to please everyone and easy to manipulate. When the recording ended, Stephanie was crying silently, tears streaming down her face without sound. "There's more," I said quietly. "Much more." I played the recording from Wednesday night, the one where they discussed my murder. I watched my daughter's face change from heartbreak to horror as she listened to the man she loved discussing the best way to kill her father. When that recording ended, she bolted from the couch and ran to the bathroom. I could hear her being sick, retching violently. I waited, giving her time to process what she had just learned. She came back 15 minutes later, her face blotchy and red, her hands shaking. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "1 week. I discovered their affair last Tuesday." 1 week. She wiped her nose with a tissue. "You've known for 1 week that my fiancé was cheating on me with my mother, and you didn't tell me?" "I needed evidence. I needed to protect you from what they were really planning." "Protect me?" Her voice was rising now, anger mixing with the grief. "Protect me from what? From knowing the truth, from making my own decisions?" I understood her anger. She felt betrayed by everyone, including me. "Stephanie, if I had told you immediately without proof, would you have believed me?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. We both knew the answer. She would have thought I was trying to sabotage her relationship out of spite or jealousy. "They were planning to steal your inheritance," I continued. "Not just the money from the divorce, but everything. They wanted to murder me and take the life insurance money, the house, everything I've saved for your future." "Murder you?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "They were actually planning to kill you?" I nodded. "Christina was going to tamper with my blood pressure medication, make it look like a heart attack." Stephanie buried her face in her hands. "I don't understand. How could Mom do this? How could James do this? I thought he loved me." The pain in her voice was unbearable. This was what I had been trying to protect her from, this moment when she realized that the two people she trusted most had been systematically betraying her. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I know how much you loved him." "Loved him?" She looked up at me, and I saw something I had never seen in my daughter's eyes before. Pure rage. "I didn't love him. I loved a lie. I loved a character he was playing. The real James is a man who was planning to murder my father for money." She stood up abruptly and started pacing the room. "How could I have been so stupid? How could I not have seen it?" "You weren't stupid. You were trusting. That's not the same thing." "Trusting?" She laughed bitterly. "Right. Trusting enough to give him access to our bank account information. Trusting enough to tell him about your investments, your insurance policies, your medical conditions. God, Dad, I helped them plan your murder and I didn't even know it." The guilt in her voice broke my heart. "Stephanie, this is not your fault." "Isn't it? I'm the one who brought him into our family. I'm the one who told Mom how wonderful he was, how perfect he was for me. I'm the one who gave them the opportunity to destroy everything." She sank back onto the couch, crying harder now. "What am I going to do? How am I going to face people? How am I going to explain why the wedding is canceled? Everyone's going to want to know what happened. You don't owe anyone an explanation. The only thing that matters is that you're safe now." "Safe?" She wiped her eyes. "Dad, I was going to marry a man who was planning to kill my father. I was going to spend my life with someone who thought murdering you would be merciful. How is that safe?" My phone buzzed. A text message. I glanced at the screen and saw James's name. "It's him," I said. Stephanie's entire body tensed. "What does he want?" I read the message aloud. "I told Detective Santos everything. I'm leaving town tonight. I'm sorry, Stephanie. You deserve better than what I am." She stared at me for a long moment. "He confessed?" I gave him a choice. Confess and cooperate or face murder charges without the possibility of a plea deal. "And Mom?" "The police arrested her an hour ago. She'll be arraigned on Monday." Stephanie nodded slowly as if she were absorbing information that was too large to process all at once. "So it's over." "The legal part is just beginning. But yes, the immediate threat is over." She was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the darkening sky. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, harder. "I need to see the house," she said. "What house?" "Their house. The one Mom was going to steal from you. I need to see what she was willing to kill you for." I drove her through the neighborhood where Christina had been planning to live after my death, past the expensive houses with their perfect lawns and 3-car garages. We stopped in front of a colonial-style house with a "for sale" sign in the yard. "This one," I said. Christina had already put down a deposit using money from our joint account. Stephanie stared at the house for a long time. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "I can see why she wanted it, but I can't understand how she thought it was worth killing for. Some people value things more than people. But her own husband, her own daughter." She turned to look at me. "Dad, how long do you think she was planning this? When do you think she stopped loving us and started seeing us as obstacles?" It was a question I had been asking myself for days. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe she never really loved us at all. Maybe we were always just useful to her." 32 years of my life," Stephanie whispered. 32 years thinking I had a mother who loved me." "You did have a mother who loved you, just not the one you thought you had." She nodded, understanding what I meant. The mother she remembered from childhood, the one who had packed her lunches and helped with homework and kissed her scraped knees, that woman had been real once. But somewhere along the way, that woman had been replaced by someone who could plan her own husband's murder while serving him pot roast. As we drove home, Stephanie was quiet again. But when we pulled into our driveway, she spoke one more time. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For protecting me. For fighting for us. For being the parent I could trust." She paused. "For being the one who actually loved me." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "That's what fathers do, sweetheart. That's what real love does." But even as I said it, I knew that the hardest part was still to come. Christina and James were gone, but the damage they had done would take much longer to heal. My daughter would never trust love the same way again, and that was a wound I couldn't protect her from. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee and watching the morning sun filter through the windows that Christina would never see again. The house felt different now, lighter. The weight of deception and lies had been lifted from every room, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years: genuine peace. The legal proceedings had concluded 3 weeks ago. Christina had been sentenced to 12 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted fraud, and theft. James received 15 years for his role as the primary instigator of the murder plot. Robert lost his law license and faced his own criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. The local newspaper had covered the story extensively. "Local woman planned husband's murder for insurance money," read the headline. But I had stopped reading the articles after the first few. The details of their betrayal were no longer important to me. What mattered was that justice had been served, and my family was safe. Stephanie had moved back into her childhood bedroom temporarily while she figured out her next steps. The transition hadn't been easy for either of us. She had good days and bad days, days when she seemed to be healing and days when the betrayal felt fresh and raw. But she was stronger than I had given her credit for, and she was rebuilding her life piece by piece. "Morning, Dad," she said, coming into the kitchen wearing pajama pants and one of my old college sweatshirts. At 32, she could still look like the little girl who used to steal bacon from my plate when she thought I wasn't looking. "Morning, sweetheart. Coffee?" "Please." She settled at the kitchen table, the same table where Christina had served me pot roast while planning my murder. We had talked about getting rid of the furniture, replacing everything that carried memories of the past, but Stephanie had convinced me otherwise. "These are our memories too," she had said. "The good ones shouldn't disappear just because she poisoned some of them." She was right, as she usually was. The kitchen table had been the site of thousands of family meals, homework sessions, heart-to-heart conversations. Christina couldn't steal those memories, just as she couldn't steal the love between father and daughter that had survived her attempts to destroy it. I poured coffee into 2 mugs and sat down across from Stephanie. She was scrolling through something on her phone, and I could see from her expression that it was good news. "The job came through," she announced, looking up with the first genuine smile I had seen in months. "Marketing director at Henderson Creative. I start Monday." "That's wonderful, honey. I'm proud of you." It had taken her 4 months to find the courage to start job hunting again. The scandal had made some employers hesitant to hire her, worried about the negative publicity. But Henderson Creative was a small, progressive firm that valued talent over gossip, and they had offered her exactly the kind of creative challenge she needed to rebuild her confidence. "It means I'll need to find my own place again," she said, studying my reaction. "I know you've enjoyed having me around." "I've loved having you around," I corrected, "but I also want you to have your own life, your own space to heal and grow." She nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The betrayal had shaken her confidence in ways that went far beyond romantic relationships. She questioned her judgment about everything now, second-guessing decisions that would have been automatic before. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think I'll ever be able to trust someone again? Romantically, I mean." It was a question she had asked in various forms over the past 6 months, and I never had an easy answer. James had damaged something fundamental in her ability to believe in love, and that wound would take time to heal. "I think," I said carefully, "that you'll learn to trust differently. You'll be more careful, more observant. You'll look for consistency between words and actions, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what if I become so careful that I never let anyone get close? Then you'll miss out on love, and that would be the real tragedy. Stephanie, what James did to you was evil, but letting his evil prevent you from ever loving again would be letting him win." She considered this, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder if there were signs I missed. Red flags I ignored because I wanted the relationship to work so badly. Probably. But that doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. Mom missed signs too, or ignored them, or—" She paused, struggling with the complexity of her feelings about Christina. "Or maybe she knew exactly who James was and chose him anyway because he was useful to her." This was the hardest part for Stephanie to process. Not just that James had betrayed her, but that her own mother had recruited him to do it. Christina hadn't just failed to protect her daughter from a predator, she had actively encouraged the predation. "I've been thinking about visiting her," Stephanie said quietly. This surprised me. She hadn't mentioned Christina in weeks, and I had assumed she was trying to move forward without looking back. "Why?" "I need to understand. I need to hear her explain how she could do what she did." She set down her coffee mug and looked directly at me. "I need to know if she ever really loved me, or if I was always just a tool to her." I had wrestled with the same question about my own relationship with Christina. Had any of it been real? The early years of our marriage, the joy when Stephanie was born, the quiet moments of companionship that had made me believe we had built something meaningful together? "Do you think her answer would change anything?" I asked. "Maybe. Maybe not. But I think I need to hear it to move forward." I nodded. "Then you should go, but take care of yourself. Don't let her manipulate you or make you feel guilty for her choices." "She can't hurt me anymore, Dad. The worst thing she could do to me she's already done. There's nothing left for her to take." That afternoon, while Stephanie was out apartment hunting, I found myself in my study going through old photo albums. Pictures of our life as a family back when I believed that family was real. Christina pushing Stephanie on a swing at the park. The three of us at Stephanie's high school graduation. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, ordinary Tuesday evenings that had felt like happiness. I stopped at a photo from Stephanie's 16th birthday party. Christina was laughing at something Stephanie had said, her arms around our daughter, her expression full of what looked like genuine love and pride. Had she been pretending even then? Or had something changed her over the years, turning love into manipulation and family into opportunity? I supposed I would never really know. And increasingly I realized that I didn't need to know. The woman in these photographs was gone, if she had ever existed at all. The woman who had tried to murder me was the real Christina, and she was exactly where she belonged. I closed the album and put it back on the shelf. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. That evening, Stephanie and I cooked dinner together, something we had been doing more often lately. She was teaching herself to make the dishes Christina used to prepare, reclaiming those family recipes and making them ours again. "I found a place," she announced as she stirred pasta sauce. "A one-bedroom apartment downtown, walking distance from the new job. It's small, but it has character." "When do you want to move?" "Next weekend, if that works for you. I was hoping you might help me with the heavy stuff." "Of course." I watched her taste the sauce and adjust the seasoning. "You know, you've become a better cook than your mother ever was." She smiled, but there was sadness in it, too. I had to. I couldn't keep eating takeout forever, and I couldn't ask you to cook for me for the rest of my life. You could have asked. I wouldn't have minded. I know. But I needed to learn to take care of myself again. Really take care of myself, not just survive. After dinner, we sat on the front porch watching the neighborhood settle into evening. It was mid-May, the kind of perfect spring evening that made you believe winter would never come again. The oak tree that Stephanie and I had planted when she was 8 was full of new leaves, green and bright with promise. "Dad?" "I want you to know something. What happened with Mom and James, it doesn't change how I feel about family, about real family." I looked at her, this strong, resilient woman who had survived betrayal that would have destroyed someone with less character. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you showed me what real love looks like, what a real father does when his family is threatened. You didn't just protect me from them, you protected me from the truth, until you could give it to me in a way that wouldn't destroy me completely." "Stephanie, let me finish." She turned to face me fully. "You could have told me about the affair right away. Let me deal with the pain while you focused on protecting yourself. You could have let me marry James and discover his true nature later, after I was legally tied to him. You could have prioritized your own hurt over mine. But you didn't. You thought about what was best for me, even when it meant carrying that knowledge alone for a week." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "You're my daughter. Protecting you is what I do." And that's exactly my point. That's what real love looks like. Not the fake devotion James showed me. Not the twisted manipulation Mom called motherhood. Real love protects, real love sacrifices, real love fights for what matters. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled around us. Somewhere down the street, children were playing in a yard, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Normal sounds of normal families living normal lives. "I think I'm going to be okay," Stephanie said eventually. "I know you are." "And I think you are too." I considered this. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt genuinely content. Not happy in the way that depends on external circumstances, but peaceful in a way that comes from within. I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged intact. I had protected my daughter and preserved our family, even though that family now consisted of just the two of us. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." Later that night, after Stephanie had gone to bed, I stood in my bedroom looking out at the backyard where I had hidden and recorded Christina and James planning my murder. The garden shed was still there, but I no longer saw it as the place where I learned about their betrayal. Now it was just a shed, holding lawn equipment and forgotten Christmas decorations. I opened the nightstand drawer where I used to keep the recordings, the photographs, all the evidence of their conspiracy. The drawer was empty now. All of that evidence had been turned over to the police, its purpose served. In its place was something new, a small framed photograph of Stephanie and me from her college graduation. Just the two of us smiling, proud of what she had accomplished. It was a good picture, a true picture, a picture of a real family. I turned off the lights and settled into bed in the house that was truly mine now, free from lies and safe from those who would harm what I loved most. For the first time in 6 months, I fell asleep easily without fear of what tomorrow might bring. Some games end with winners and losers. This one ended with something better: truth, justice, and the quiet satisfaction of protecting what mattered most. It had been the most dangerous game I had ever played, but also the most important, and I had won everything that truly mattered.